could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Bowman. Present. Alderman Dahlman, absent. Alderman Coburn.
Here.
Alderman Milner. Present. Alderman Dickerson.
Here.
Alderman Long, absent. Alderman Stoll, absent. Alderman Stafford.
Here.
Mayor Hassey.
Here, and we do have a quorum. A microphone, excuse me. It's not on our regular agenda, but I did have a request for somebody to speak from the public, so before we move on with item A, I'll allow anybody who wants to, anybody else besides John would like to speak, I'll give you a moment to approach us and speak.
Mr. Mayor. Good evening to each of you. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. I was before a Board of Alderman here 4 years ago on the same subject that you're discussing tonight. And at that time, we probably wasn't organized the right way we should have been. We was having difficulties in the housing industry in this town. From 2008 to 2012, we had built one house a year. There had been times when we had turned out more than a house a week in this community. Since that time of that discussion in 2012, the board that I was before chose to give us a waiver for 25 building permits. Codes Department shared with me week before last that 18 of those waivers had been used. 2 of them were on duplexes. 4 of them were on speculative houses. Since 2012 to 16, of those 4 speculative houses, only 3 of them are sold. 1 of them is still on the market. It's had a birthday. We have, if you take the 16 and the 4 years that we have done that, that's a house every 3 months. In the last 15 months, we have removed 5 houses. That's 1 every 3 months. So the housing market is a shipwreck. I don't know how to explain to you how I feel about this particular ordinance. I know it's a law. I know that it has left a lot of oil on the water and a lot of broken glass in the community. It is like walking around with an IED in your hip pocket when you're trying to put together a project, because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how to suggest that you undo something like this. I wish I did know. I have a heavy heart for the decision you people have got to make. The idea, probably, it's like a coin. It has 2 sides. It probably is a good idea in good times, in the right neighborhood. In Harrisonville, Missouri, we have never had a lot of monies. This is a financially strapped community ever since the Civil War. We've never had major industry. We've got more industry today than we ever had. But we have also lost a lot of jobs out of this town. It's my thought, and I don't know that this is right, but I do not understand how we can continue going the route we're going. As we all know, we are in a major recession. When historians write about this 20 years from now or 25 years from now, I question that what it won't be considered the 2nd worst depression we've had in the last century. We had 11 depressions, or 11 recessions in the last 100 years. The biggest one was the Dust Bowl years. That was brought on by government. government guaranteed the price of wheat, and people plowed up the prairies. The drought came and the wind came. Now we're to the point that we are honoring our unemployed in the state of Missouri with only 13 weeks of unemployment insurance, where it hadn't been many months ago, it was 99 weeks. So the overall picture of things is that we have an assessment here with these impact fees that I do not understand how we can move forward at all. And my heart goes out to these young people that want to take the old buildings around the square and try and make good with them. But it's bigger than the square. Again, I thank you for letting me speak. I would be glad to answer any questions if there is any. If not, I want to wish you the very best on this decision as you work through this.
Thank you, John.
I thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening before we move on? All right, seeing no one, we will move on to Agenda A, Council Bill 017. I guess since Steve is not here, I can read this. Council Bill 017 is an ordinance to establish a moratorium on the collection of capacity investment recovery fees established in Ordinance 3132. First reading of Council Bill 017. Discussion. Mr. Thorwald, would you like to kick it off?
Certainly. The board has conferred on this in a work session a couple of weeks ago, and we took that information and came back with this ordinance, which tries to accomplish three things. You recall at that time we talked about trying to incentivize the development of the square. So what we've done with this ordinance is, as I said, three different things. Number one, to establish and define an area for this particular incentive. And that area is bounded, I believe, by Mechanic Street on the south, Wirt on the east, Chestnut on the north, and Main Terrace on the west, encompassing the courthouse block and all the rocks around it that surround it, that come across that. An area we would commonly refer to as the square area. There's not a formal definition of it, so we had to define it somehow. It's not the whole of the historic part of town. It's not the whole of the original part of town. It's just focused narrowly on that area of the square. The second.
Could you repeat that description one more time, please?
Certainly. To the south, south boundary would be Mechanic Street. To the east, Wirt Lane. Wirt Lane. They're right just west of the library. To the north is Chestnut Street, which I think runs on the north side of where the police station is, the new police station, and then across to the west, Main Terrace. And that brings us back down to Mechanic Street. So that's the first thing, is to define an area of impact. The second is to, as we discussed, have a reduction in those fees. And the ordinance as it's currently established calculates what the facility or the capacity investment recovery would be, and then discounts it by 55%. So it charges 45% of what that calculated fee is. What we're proposing in here is that they would discount it 100%, meaning there would be a zero fee within that area. Zero is pretty easy to define and understand, I think, so there wouldn't be any charge on the utility capacity recoveries on that. You still have to get a building permit, you still have to do those kind of things, but there wouldn't be that extra charge on that capacity fee. The third would be the duration, and I have it here in the ordinance. I believe that it would be in effect from its passage and approval and through the end of calendar year, that is December 31st, 2017, so almost 2 years. My reasoning on that is, if you're going to have an incentive, you want to jumpstart some development, that means there should be some sort of time frame for that. Certainly understand, it can't happen right away because there's lead time involved in these types of consideration for people. If you were to think about doing some investment, you couldn't turn that around and apply for a permit within 60 days or anything like that. You have to get your financing ahead, you have to get your plans in front of you, you have to get control of the different buildings and all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna take some time to get these things done. But it would be in effect for permits that were issued now through the end of December of 2017. That, of course, is also subject to if the board wanted to amend that, or if we got into this and wanted to extend it at some later time, that would be easily done.
So, but just to clarify, so I'm understanding right.
Josh, can you be sure you use your mic?
Sorry, thank
No
you.
problem, no problem.
So if we're December 30th of 2017 and they acquire a building permit, they would still fall into that 2-year time frame.
That is correct. That doesn't mean that the project would be completed, but it would be underway well enough that you would have gone ahead and gotten the building permit for it.
I thought that we had discussed that doing the square was not gonna be of any significance with the impact fees that, I mean, in that area, there wasn't gonna be that kind of load required. And so I was under the impression we weren't gonna have an expiration date, it was going to just be over there forever to help the people that bought the historic building. Because it was my understanding that there wasn't ever gonna be a capacity load in that area worthy of charging the EDU.
It wasn't that there's never going to be any capacity load, but it's not, in the scheme of the overall city
That's what I mean.
redevelopment, it's probably not going to be that
Yeah.
much. There might be some, and I think there's a couple of examples where it's certainly significant to the people that are contemplating those types of development, that it's one more fee and one more hurdle that they'd have to go through, so it's significant to them. I don't want to discount that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I don't think we had a clear consensus of the board that there would never be any expiration date on that. So that's why I put it in there. And as I said, I think if you're going to offer an incentive and you want to get people interested in that, it's a different incentive if you have it for unlimited time versus for now. Here's a time, some reasonable amount of time, but go ahead and get people interested in starting. I want to take advantage of this offer now. I want to focus my attention on developing the square. That was my understanding of what the board's concerns were.
Yeah, and and again, like I said, my feeling on wanting to do this for those people that have those buildings is because there's so much cost in restoring the actual structures, that their money's so tied up in just getting their money's so stretched, and they're really, in my opinion, doing us a favor by taking those buildings on for the whole city to help them out. And I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I would like for us not to have the time limit. But, you know, if there's some reason the rest of you want it, that's okay. But I would just like to have the square and let them go, and, because they're gonna go fall under all our codes, they're gonna get a building permit, they're gonna do all the other things with that.
Well, it was more of a, not so much an incentive as it was removing a roadblock, is what I viewed it as when this came up. It
that's
kind
a
of
good-
presented itself as this could be a roadblock to developing it. And that's why we were wanting to focus, I mean, John brought up a bigger, subject to discuss. Well, this is something that, it was much easier, we could do something about this quickly and
Yeah,
as
that's
it applies to the square, and it felt like a kind of a roadblock to development of the square, which, everybody has expressed interest in that. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any argument from anybody in this town about what they want to see with that square, so, and obviously from our conversation, it was, everybody shared the same sentiments. Alderman Bowman, did you look like you were primed for the microphone there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the explanation that you gave, Mike, and I appreciate David's comments too. When I read through this, I understand the importance of putting some type of a time frame on it, because it is a motivating factor for people to proceed with construction. I don't think that December the 31st of 2017 is perhaps a long enough extension for that, particularly when you're talking about historic buildings and people are applying for financial help from lenders. There's a lot of paperwork that's involved. There's certainly a lot of, particularly if they're looking for a small business loan or a historic development loan, there's planning and engineering opinions and things that lenders are gonna want. And so I would like for us just to review other possible options at extending that date, whether it means extending it to 2018, or perhaps it means issuing a certain number of waivers for our historic buildings, much like we've done with impact fees for our other construction in town. So I love the idea, I support the idea. I would like for us to discuss perhaps other ways of extending that opportunity for people that want to open a business on the square. Josh?
A couple of things. I personally, I understand why Mike wants to limit it. I'm okay if we want to talk about bumping the limit out, but I do think, I think Mike's right. I think you want to put one on it, but if you think it needs to be, a 5-year window to get a project started, I'll listen to that argument. If anybody wants to have it, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know that we want to go, I don't know if there's a problem with going, granting a certain number of variances for this or whatever, but it just seems like more to keep track of than what we need to do. I mean, if it's in the box, it's in the box. And, sorry.
Go ahead.
One other just question for Mike or Eric, whoever needs to field it, but I do notice if we look inside what is the area that we're proposing, for kind of a ease of getting it done right now, there are some vacant lots, not a ton, but there are some vacant lots. If somebody wanted to develop that vacant lot, would they have the same property rights essentially for those as a pre-existing building?
I thought we kind of touched on that, didn't we, last time? And wasn't it, didn't we, in my opinion, I thought we had standing building, was just my
Well,
own thought process.
If we look at the fees that we're discussing here, we mentioned before, these are not, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not truly the impact fees. These are, like I say, the capacity investment. These are a different type of fee. The impact fee is, if these buildings there was nothing there was no water, sewer, electric, and we had to provide that, we're having to add additional infrastructure. Well, these are not buildings that don't have that, even the ones, the empty lots, all that is still there on the property. What it is maybe the capacity of these buildings when they were last used was less than what it would be today. I mean, it's going to need more capacity to operate in today's, business world. So, really, I mean, I understand the idea of a time limit, you could create an incentive, but honestly, in this area, I mean, you don't have you're not removing an impact fee because these buildings, there's no impact because the infrastructure's there, it's the upgrade. Well, my thought is people have been asking this for years, people will complain, well, why doesn't the city do something about the square? Well, a privately owned area of town is not something the city goes in and says, hey, we're gonna drop $10 million on fixing these buildings. That's not what the city does. Well, now the buildings are for sale, you have people who are buying them to develop them. This is where I see that the city can step in and make a big step, which is to remove remove the capacity fees completely, because it really, that's an area that I feel should not have these capacity fees. I mean, if it had a larger impact to us overall, for the next 20 years or whatever, if somebody developed, yeah, we would want to talk about a time limit because we're foregoing a chunk of money. Well, Keith even commented the biggest portion is the electric, and he even said it's minimal in the big scheme of things. But the effect that it has for these developers in getting people to come to our community and invest in our square is huge. So I think having the date on there, I think it says a lot more if we are just getting rid of these as it applies to the square in that area.
So are you thinking yay or nay on vacant lots?
Well, the vacant lots, I mean, if you build a building, I guess, what are you gonna build up there? It's already gonna have to be, Rick can jump in if I'm wrong, it would have to be a historically aesthetic building, am I right? It would have
Depends
to.
on where you're looking at. If it's right on the square, yes. If it's right off of the square,
Mhm.
no.
And then how many lots do we have? I mean, looking at this area, how many lots would be, I mean, you have the parking lot area down here.
Your picture, go
A
ahead.
defined lot.
Well, I mean, well, there's,
There's
You
not
could-
a lot, but
Yeah.
there's some.
Really?
Josh, to answer your question,
Yes.
in the way we would look at this from the staff perspective is those vacant lots, the lots that are currently vacant now, if they were to be developed, there would be some impact more than what the vacant lot would have. Some of them did have, at some point in time, infrastructure provided to it, and so would be subject to this fee. Anything within that boundary, though, would be at zero.
Okay,
Whether it's a vacant lot or an existing building, because you're focusing on the redevelopment of this area.
right.
Whether it's a new compatible construction on a currently vacant lot in there, or a rehabbing of an existing building to try to save it.
Well, I guess I should clarify, I mean, I would ask the question, because I would be myself also in favor of it on the vacant lots that sit there too, because I mean, truly, even if somebody wants to build a new building there, all they're doing is increasing traffic to the area, which, you know, increases the want and need for the buildings that do sit there, so.
There's also been a couple of comments about the time, the end of 2017 is my construct, that's as arbitrary as any other thing. I would say, as I previously said, that I believe that there should be a defined time for this incentive, as opposed to, that's just my argument, but 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I can see any one of those arguments. You have to put something in the ordinance to give us something to talk about, and that can certainly be amended. I would, however, caution if you wanted to extend it out past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you might as well not have one, because that's almost open-ended enough as to not be any end at all. It also becomes a little harder to, well, for lack of a better term, to administer. You know how,
Right.
you know, well, you've got 16 more years left on this incentive. I mean, that's beyond the scope of many of the people that are gonna be here or gonna be involved, either from property owners or from staff or anything else.
Well, and my opinion is too, I mean, we're talking about incentives here to get somebody to come down. I think in this area, we are lucky to have anyone come. And I think the easier we make it for them to put their money where it needs to be on the buildings that we're trying to save. And that's what is important to me.
Well, and I guess, I think my only thought on that too is, I'm kind of in agreement with David, I know you guys are all shocked about that.
Marcia, use your mic for us, would you please? Thank you.
Make sure that gets in the minutes, would you?
I said I'm kind of in agreement with David on this one. I think my thought behind that is, and I kind of soundboarded off of that today, you know, if we're going to do this and make this some kind of an, something that will help bring the investments in there, you know, just like with the Cooks, for example, they bought more than one building. Now, they may be working on this building right now, and long range have a process, you know, 3 to 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, to get the other one going. So you don't want to cut them off. You know, if somebody wants to come in and say, I'm gonna buy 3 buildings, and eventually I'm gonna do this, this, and this. Well, you don't want to, I would be nervous to cut them off at some point of moving forward with their other buildings. I guess that would be my only thought about putting a time frame on it.
Alderman Cooper?
But like Mike said, this is just setting a target date now, that it would be open to amendment.
Right.
Once they come up with a plan, it could be amended.
True, very
And
true.
we've done that.
I want to make sure that as we do this, we set the tone for, we are all on board with development here, and we are going to work hard to make sure that it happens within our community.
Unlimited.
Unlimited as far as we don't, you know, we want you to come in and, we want you to come in and do what we'd love to see happen.
You know, and these fees were, like I say, these were established, I assume, we think we discussed this, it was in the last 10 years or 5 years that we came to these. And, you know, you come up with these ideas and you say, hey, we need to start thinking about the future and having this fee for the extra draws in our system. That's, you know, thinking ahead. Well, you don't run into it until we start getting the developments of, okay, maybe it really was not at the time it was put in place, it shouldn't have affected this area to begin with. I mean, this was an area that, and like I say, it's likely not going to have a huge draw. Even if somebody builds a new building, what are they gonna build that's going to draw a huge amount of water, electricity? I mean, it's not like you're going to have a, one of these manufacturing places that, you know, comes to town visiting. They're not gonna be wanting to build up at the square and put some big draw for water or electric or anything like that. So really, your restaurants, I think, would be your biggest user of electricity as opposed to the normal, I mean, compared to like the Chamber of Commerce building, they probably don't draw near the electricity like Pearl Street would when it's open. So, you know, you really aren't gonna have too many buildings, even if they construct one, that are gonna draw huge amounts. So, like I said, to me, it was more of a roadblock than it was, we're trying to make an incentive. We're trying to remove a roadblock to developing this, and we have no idea how many years it will take to develop this. I mean, like John said, we are still floating around feeling effects of recession. I mean, they tell us that things are getting better, the economy's getting better. Well, you know, if you stand here, it's great. If you stand over there, it's maybe not so great. So, we have no idea what the future holds, and I kinda hate to, like Mike said, you get too far out, you might as well not have it. Well, if we set 5 years, is that really enough? And there's nothing that could, like, again, this extending it, there's nothing that could prevent a future board for saying, hey, you know, now this is all redeveloped, everything's done, we wanna bring this in line with the rest of the city. I doubt that would ever happen. They'll probably, you know, it's a old part of town that you wanna keep, you know, vibrant. It's a huge tourist attraction. So, like I said, I viewed it more as of a roadblock to the development than as we're trying to put an incentive. I mean, we've got people that are interested, you know, there's a fine example right there, that are interested in doing this, but this would be a roadblock to him doing this, and I think we need to remove it.
Yeah, and I, you know, heck, most of us may not be here in 5 years, so, you know, I would hate to see it come to a stop at that point with a whole other, you know, not that you wanna control the world forever, but
Right.
you certainly want to see the progress continue, so.
Honestly, I would say that, I mean, it's doing the straw poll, I think what it sounds like is I think we'd probably move to, you know, look at an amended version that just says, remove the time limit and vote on that, because I mean, it feels like what I'm seeing for the most part is gonna be in favor of no limit placed on.
Can I ask a couple of questions here?
Sure can. Anything for you, Mike?
No.
Just ask a question if you're not willing to listen to the answers.
That's right. No, go ahead.
First question I had was, are we okay with the boundaries?
I think so.
Yeah.
I like that boundary.
Yeah.
Well, do we need to explain the discussion of the wider boundary? You ended up, if you look at your picture, you ended up cutting across properties in odd areas, and it becomes for staff, it was becoming a very difficult task to get this defined, and we gave them a short time frame to do this. So it can be done very quickly, and so that's kind of we gotta start somewhere. So this is that's why it's dumbed down from what we talked about before, so.
Personally, I feel like this is our problem. I feel like this is our problem area, as a, you know, hot stove to deal with, and there's, as far as I know, nothing that this can't ever be expanded, so I don't know why you wouldn't roll with that, easy to find and
Yeah,
go.
I like that.
Second question, is the 0 the right number?
Yes.
I thought it was, but just make sure.
You were thinking negative, you wanna like give them?
Hey, that's not something we can. And then the third question, would the board then prefer that section 2, toward the end, say that moratorium on the fees is hereby declared, and then period, and eliminate the phrase for the period ending December 31, 2017? Because your choices are, you could leave it for that period, you could change the year to make it 2019 or 2020 or something like that, or you could take out that last phrase and have it just for an indefinite period of time until some future board wanted to make some other arrangement.
I would like to see that, yes.
Just leave off before the period ended December 31st.
And if that's the consensus of the board,
We have to vote
Yeah.
to.
then you would vote to amend it by striking the phrase for the period ending December 31st,
And then we can
and
have a
then
second
you would
reading.
have a second reading on the amended version.
Can we make a motion?
That's the, yeah.
There's discussion, I mean, if anybody else has
I
anything.
just want to put my points in there. I like to, you know, just eliminate, but I agree with Mike that it is an incentive. My fear is that if we dropped it and you know, permanently, that would not encourage competition. I mean, somebody could go in and buy 2 buildings, and I can just sit on this building and put a ridiculous price on it to sell it, because I know that keeps my competition out. And I just see if you get a date on it, you know, people are gonna be wanting to move. And I'll go with 2018 or 17. I see it as something that somebody would buy up the square and just for competition purposes, keep it empty, because there's no fees and no incentive, no, you know, I don't know.
I tend to agree with you, Ivan, but I will say the flip side of it is, anything that we put in on the books, we also have the ability to take off. So, I mean, if you run into that situation of, you know, you get another person in who just buys all the buildings and then they sit vacant, we'll just remove it.
We have that problem now.
Do you have something you wanted to
Sure.
interject since this,
Tell me your name again,
Mike Freeland,
and your address.
1226 East 25th Street, South. Independence,
Okay,
64055.
thank you.
I wasn't planning on talking tonight, and everybody, I think, is on agreement that it's great to know that the city wants the square revitalized. The only thing disturbing that I heard tonight was about the 2017 deadline. Just to tell you from my experience, we had my wife and I had another business opportunity in 2014, and it took us about 9 to 12 months to get the funding put together. And then we hit a roadblock, and it literally died. And so we stumbled upon, shared with many people, I worked down here 20 years ago for a short stint in Harrisonville. We found this building on January 1st, 2014, and I've worked every day on this. The getting it on historic registry takes minimally 9 to 12 months. Because of the age of the building too, we just did an environmental report that took 6 to 8 weeks. That triggered a phase 1, which took 6 to 8 weeks, triggered a phase 2, took 6 to 8 weeks. I have literally worked on this for almost 14 months straight. By the time we get the hammer swung, it will be 16 to 17 months. So that December 31st, 2017, that means the building has to be, and when we negotiated with Dell, he said you have 3 weeks to buy the building. We said, this is a miracle, we have got the cash because we were working to finance another project. But it took us 9 to 12 months. So if you say that December 31st, 2017 is the deadline, if it doesn't start right now, then we'll be in the same discussion. Now, the great thing is the aldermen here, you guys care about the square. So if it needs to be extended, I don't see that being an issue. I just think that to have anything less than a 5-year window, I mean, I used to have a business on Independence Square. It's been going on for 25 years and there's still 22 buildings vacant. So I can see the difficulty with not having a deadline at all, but I think, and I don't want to, for a better phrase, you know, not be appreciative of the gift horse if we're ready to start and this impact comes through, but I don't want to be the only business on the square. It's vital that we have ourselves and the other businesses will too, so that just really worries me. If it's less than 5 years, I mean, it could take somebody, you know, a year to develop the plan, a year to get, I mean, it could still, I think if there's a 5-year plan, that is still a good incentive, like, hey, let's get started. And if you want to revisit it at 5 years, I just think if it's a year and a half, that's just for us, that worries me, because I know that I worked every day for 15 months, and that means if there's other buildings that just sold, that means that might incentivize them to get done. But there's hurdles that we have came up that we have, like, we're so frustrated on, like, we were ready to get started last spring. So that's the only thing I would appeal to the alderman, is just like, you know, at least have a 4-year window. I think I would encourage you for a 5, but I also, if you have it indefinitely, then I don't know if that incentivizes as well too, but I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
So 5 years would be roughly the end of 2020, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20.
But see, by then, his business is gonna be up and rolling, and he's ready to start a new one, and so.
I still think, I mean, he made a good point about the Independence Square. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
You know, we have no idea how long it's gonna take
It won't be
for,
done.
we have no, you know, this is something we don't want to have a roadblock. Again, this is something if in the future, you know, we have to always remember the future board, yeah, we could renew this, all this, the future board could come back to these if there was, if there was shown some absolute need, but I think, you know, we've hashed over it, and we see that there's, the need to have the fees in this area is not real high, but the need to not have them is very high. So I think you're sending the right message by just getting rid of them for now. I mean, it's, you know, we're showing a commitment to that square, and I think that's the message we were wanting to send. But, I mean, I like your point, Ivan. I mean, if you know, we don't want somebody coming in here setting up the same trap we had before, I mean, which was one guy owns the whole square and nobody can get anything done. We're finally starting to get some traction. You know, I don't know how many of those type people are out there. I mean, who's got the money and wants to go spend it on that?
Ivan, how long is it gonna take you guys to get the Runenberger furniture store up?
They're just, our church is now just starting the campaign, really,
Uh-huh.
to raising, you know.
I mean, this is for you guys too.
I know.
You're gonna hurt yourself?
No, I mean, I like your point. I mean,
just didn't
I'm
wanna
glad you brought that up.
Say, well, there's no incentive for somebody to buy it, I'll just buy it and keep people out, and I got a hot store here, so I wouldn't, you know, I'm just saying that, because I like competition.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend this and take this December date out and leave it open indefinitely.
Second.
A motion from Alderman Dickerson to amend, to remove the December date, and a second from Alderman Coburn. I believe we need roll call, or let's do a roll call on this.
Okay. Alderman Bowman,
Aye.
Alderman Dahlman,
Aye.
Alderman Coburn,
Aye.
Alderman Milner,
Aye.
Alderman Dickerson,
Aye.
Alderman Long, absent, Alderman Stoll,
Aye.
Alderman Stafford.
Aye.
All right, so, Council Bill 017 is an ordinance to establish a moratorium on the collection of capacity investment recovery fees established in ordinance 3132 as amended. Second reading of Council Bill 017.
And so that everyone is clear, then the phrase for the period ending December 31st, 2017 is eliminated.
Stricken.
Okay.
Alderman Bowman,
Aye.
Alderman Dahlman. Aye. Alderman Coburn,
Aye.
Alderman Milner.
Aye.
Alderman Dickerson.
Aye.
Alderman Long, absent, Alderman Stoll,
Aye.
Alderman Stafford.
Aye.
And Council Bill 017 becomes ordinance 03352. And that is all we have for tonight, so we will adjourn. Thank you all, and,
Move we adjourn.
oh, yes, we do need a motion for that, I apologize. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned, thank you.